The champagne flute trembled in my hand, but not from nerves. It was the ocean breeze cutting across the Muskoka lakefront, tugging at the hem of my navy dress, the dress my son had once told me looked like something a librarian would wear to a funeral. I had worn it anyway. I had worn it because it was the only thing in my closet that still felt like me. My son-in-law's smirk caught the golden light of the late August sunset as he raised his glass to the 47 guests gathered on the private dock of the Pinewood Resort. Beside him, my daughter Madison stood in a Vera Wang gown that had cost more than my entire first year of teaching kindergarten in Thunder Bay. She was 29 years old, and she had not looked me in the eye all afternoon. Before we proceed to the reception, my son-in-law Trevor announced, his voice smooth as the Georgian Bay water behind him, "There's a small family matter we'd like to address. A tradition, you might say, in the Ashworth family." The Ashworths. His family. Old Toronto money. The kind of people who had summer cottages older than my entire bloodline in this country. I watched Madison's fingers tighten around her bouquet of white peonies. Peonies, she had told me, 6 weeks ago over a hurried phone call, that she couldn't possibly have me help arrange. Because the florist Mrs. Ashworth recommended handles everything, Mom. You wouldn't understand the aesthetic. My lovely mother-in-law, Eleanor, Trevor continued, turning to me with that practiced boardroom smile, has graciously supported Madison throughout her life. But the Ashworth family believes that true commitment is demonstrated through continued contribution. So we've prepared a modest request to formalize her place in our family circle. He pulled a folded cream envelope from his breast pocket. Madison still would not look at me. $50,000, Eleanor. A contribution to the Ashworth Family Trust, payable within 30 days. A gesture of solidarity. His teeth gleamed. Or, of course, you could choose a quieter retirement. Perhaps somewhere in the Maritimes. I hear Moncton is affordable. A woman behind me gasped. Someone's fork clinked against china. The lake water lapped against the wooden pilings below our feet. And then Madison spoke. My Madison, the little girl I had carried through 2 Ontario winters without a proper winter coat of my own, the teenager I had driven to piano lessons in a rusted 2001 Corolla, the university student whose tuition I had paid by taking on a second shift at the community center for 4 consecutive years. Mom, she said, her voice bright and rehearsed, or you could always spend your golden years at one of those nice provincial long-term care homes. We hear the waitlists aren't so bad if you apply early. I took a slow sip of champagne. I looked at my daughter. I looked at her husband. I looked at the 47 faces turned toward me, some horrified, some curious, some Ashworths wearing the same thin, amused smile. And I smiled back. You forgot one thing, I said softly. Trevor's eyebrow twitched. Madison's bouquet began to shake. But to understand what happened next, to understand why my smile made the blood drain from both their faces before the lakefront erupted into chaos, you need to go back with me. Back 23 years, to a snowy February night in a cramped walk-up apartment above a laundromat on Dufferin Street in Toronto. Back to the night I made the most important decision of my life. I was 27 years old and I was bleeding from my lower lip. My husband at the time, Madison's biological father, a man I no longer name aloud, had fallen asleep on the couch, one hand still wrapped around a half-empty bottle of Crown Royal. The television was playing a rerun of Hockey Night in Canada. The score flickered on the screen, meaningless. The Leafs were losing. The Leafs were always losing. Madison was 6 years old. She was asleep in the bedroom we shared, her small body curled around the stuffed beaver my late mother had given her for her 3rd birthday. A beaver because, my mother had said, every Canadian child should love the national animal before she loves anything else. I stood in the bathroom, pressing a folded tea towel to my lip, and I made a list in my head. Savings. $482, hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale on the top shelf of the closet. Family. None that could help. My mother had passed the previous winter. My father had died when I was 9. No siblings. His family, in New Brunswick, had made it clear years ago that what happened between a husband and wife was private. Job, part-time receptionist at a dental clinic in Etobicoke, $14 an hour. Plan, none. I packed a single canvas duffel bag that night. Madison's favorite pajamas, the ones with the little maple leaves. Her beaver. Our birth certificates. Her medication for asthma, my mother's wedding ring, which I had been hiding for 3 years. And the $482. I woke Madison at 4 in the morning. She blinked up at me with those enormous brown eyes, his eyes. I realized with a pang, though I prayed she would never know the man behind them. "Are we going on an adventure, Mama?" she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "A big one." I carried her down 3 flights of stairs in my arms because I was too afraid the floorboards would creak under her weight. I walked 4 blocks to the all-night subway station in -20 weather, my breath crystallizing on the scarf wrapped around her face. I took the first train east, and then a GO train north, and by the time the sun rose over Lake Simcoe, we were in a town called Orillia, where I knew no one, and no one knew me. The women's shelter there took us in for 6 weeks. The woman who ran it, her name was Patricia, and I have named her in my will, helped me file for emergency legal aid, a restraining order, and a Legal Aid Ontario certificate for family court. She helped me apply for subsidized housing. She helped me find a job stocking shelves at the local Zehrs grocery store. For 3 years, Madison and I lived in a 1-bedroom basement apartment on Peter Street. The ceiling leaked every spring thaw. The radiator made a sound like a dying moose. I worked 3 jobs. The grocery store during the day, a cleaning shift at the Orillia hospital 3 evenings a week, and weekend bookkeeping for a local accountant who paid me under the table because he felt sorry for us. Madison never knew any of it. That was the promise I had made to myself on the GO train, that first morning she would never know that her mother was tired. She would never know that her mother skipped meals so she could have Kraft dinner with real hot dogs instead of store-brand wieners. She would never know that I wore the same 3 outfits for 4 years so I could buy her the Roots sweatshirt she had seen on a classmate. She would never know that the Christmas when she was 9, the only reason there were presents under the tree was because a stranger from the United Church on Muskoka Street had dropped off a box on our porch. She thought we were doing fine. She thought her mother was a happy, competent woman who always had a smile for her and a warm dinner on the table. And that was exactly what I wanted her to think. By the time Madison was 12, I had saved enough to move us into a proper 2-bedroom townhouse in the north end of Orillia. By the time she was 15, I had been promoted to a full-time administrative role at the hospital. By the time she was 18, I had finished my own college diploma in business administration at Georgian College, taking night classes for 6 years. Madison got into Queen's University in Kingston, a Bachelor of Commerce. Full-time, on campus. The tuition was $72,000 over 4 years. The residence fees were another $48,000. Textbooks, laptops, winter clothes, flights home at Christmas, a meal plan, a phone bill, a sorority membership. She begged me to let her join. All of it, every single dollar, came from me. I took out a second mortgage on the townhouse. I sold my mother's wedding ring. I picked up weekend shifts again, this time doing medical transcription from home. I did not buy myself new clothes for 4 years. I ate lentil soup out of a thermos for lunch every single day. And Madison thrived. She made the dean's list. She joined the Commerce Society. She spent her 3rd-year exchange at the London School of Economics, which cost me another $22,000 that I paid off, slowly, over the following 3 years. Something changed in her during that exchange year. She came back with a clipped British vowel she had never had before. She came back rolling her eyes when I served her the butter tarts I had always made for her homecoming. She came back with new friends, friends whose parents owned ski chalets in Whistler, friends whose families had box seats at Scotiabank Arena, friends who had never eaten a no-name brand anything in their lives. The first time she introduced me to one of them, a girl named Saskia, whose father was apparently something important at RBC Capital Markets. She introduced me as my mom, who works in healthcare administration. Not a lie, technically. But not the truth either. Not the woman who had scrubbed hospital toilets at 3 in the morning so her daughter could have braces. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday night in late October, 2 years after Madison's graduation. I was sitting in my kitchen in Orillia, eating a reheated shepherd's pie, when my phone rang. "Mom," she said, and she was crying. "Mom, I need your help." My stomach dropped. I had not heard her cry in years. "What is it, baby? What's wrong?" "I need $97,000. I set down my fork. "Madison. It's for a business opportunity, Mom. Trevor and I, there's this venture. A boutique financial consulting firm in Yorkville. His family won't invest because they want him to learn independence, that's what his father said, but if I don't come up with my share of the partnership buy-in, I lose my spot. And Trevor? Her voice broke. Trevor says if I can't contribute, maybe I'm not ready for the kind of life he's building. I closed my eyes. $97,000. I had, at that point, exactly $111,000 in my retirement savings. I was 53 years old. I had no pension beyond the Canada pension plan. My plan had been to retire at 67, sell the townhouse, and move into a small condo in Barrie where I could walk to the waterfront. Madison, I said carefully, have you thought about a small business loan? BDC has programs for. Mom, please. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate. I thought about the stuffed beaver. I thought about the GO train. I thought about Patricia at the shelter. I'll wire it tomorrow, I said. 2 weeks later, she and Trevor got engaged. 6 months later, they announced the wedding at a private resort on Lake Muskoka that the Ashworths had booked for 3 days. 8 months later, I was standing on that dock in my navy dress, listening to my son-in-law demand another $50,000 from me while my daughter suggested I retire to a long-term care home. But here is the thing about quiet women who have been through winters alone. We notice things. About 3 months before the wedding, during one of my rare visits to the condo Madison and Trevor shared in Liberty Village, I had gone looking for a spare charger in Madison's home office, and I had found a spreadsheet open on her desktop computer. The tab was labeled, in neat sans serif font, Mother Management Plan. I did not touch the mouse. I did not scroll. I simply read what was on the screen. Column A listed dates. Column B listed amounts. Column C listed what the spreadsheet called extraction strategies, with entries like Guilt Queen's tuition reminder, sympathy mention father, urgency business opportunity, legacy grandchild aspiration. Column D was labeled projected lifetime yield and contained a single figure at the bottom, $847,000. $847,000. That was what my daughter and her fiancé had decided I was worth to them, over the rest of my life, if they played me correctly. I did not confront her. I did not cry. I did not say a single word. I went home to Orillia that Sunday night, and on Monday morning I called a lawyer. Her name was Hélène Beaudoin, and she had been recommended to me by a woman I worked with at the hospital whose own daughter had tried something similar a decade earlier. Hélène was in her early 60s, Franco-Ontarian, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. I told her everything. The spreadsheet. The $97,000. The wedding in Muskoka. Eleanor, she said, after I finished, how much of what you've given Madison over the years is documented? I looked at her blankly. Documented? Bank transfers. E-transfers. Cancelled checks. Wire confirmations. All of it. I've kept every record since she was 18. Hélène smiled for the first time. Every single cent? I was raised by a woman who lived through the Depression. Yes. Every single cent. And the $97,000, was there any written agreement? An email? A text message? She texted me. She called it an investment partnership buy-in. She promised I would see returns within 18 months. Do you still have that text? I have a screenshot. Hélène leaned back in her leather chair. Eleanor, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Under Ontario law, money transferred between adult family members with a stated expectation of return even informally can, under certain circumstances, be treated as a loan rather than a gift, especially with documentation, especially with a stated return, especially when one party has been demonstrably deceived about the other's intentions. I did not say anything. We can file a civil claim in Superior Court, she continued, for recovery of the $97,000 as a fraudulently induced loan. We can seek interest. We can seek costs. And depending on what else we uncover, depending on whether her husband's Ashworth Family Trust is a legitimate registered entity or simply a shell for receiving solicited funds from vulnerable family members, we may have grounds for something considerably more significant. She paused. But Eleanor, I have to ask you, is this what you want? Because once we begin, there is no taking it back. Your relationship with your daughter, as you know it, will end. I thought about the spreadsheet. I thought about Guilt Queen's tuition reminder. I thought about the stuffed beaver. Hélène, I said quietly, my relationship with my daughter, as I knew it, ended the day she opened that spreadsheet. We spent the next 4 months quietly building the case. Hélène retained a forensic accountant who discovered that the Ashworth Family Trust was not, in fact, a registered trust at all. It was a numbered Ontario corporation, 2847193 Ontario Incorporated, registered to Trevor's personal address in Liberty Village, with no assets, no other shareholders, and a bank account that had, in the previous fiscal year, received contributions from 4 other women. 4 other mothers-in-law. 3 of whom had declined to come forward. One of whom, a widow in Oakville named Linda Tremblay, had agreed to swear an affidavit. The boutique financial consulting firm Madison had supposedly bought into did not exist. The $97,000 had been used, according to bank records Hélène obtained through discovery, to pay the down payment on a pre-construction condo in King West that was registered solely in Trevor's name. I received the wedding invitation 3 weeks before the ceremony. I RSVP'd, yes. Hélène filed the statement of claim the Monday before the wedding. Service was set to be completed on the groom in person, by a process server during the reception on the Saturday evening. Timed. Specifically, for 8:15 p.m. And so, I stood on that dock in my navy dress, at approximately 7:47 p.m., holding my champagne flute, listening to my son-in-law suggest I cough up another $50,000 or disappear to Moncton. "You forgot one thing," I said softly. Trevor's smile faltered, just a fraction. "Excuse me?" I set the champagne flute down on the small table beside me. I reached into the beaded clutch that had been my mother's, the only item of real value I had ever refused to sell, and I withdrew a single folded sheet of paper. I said, "You forgot one thing." Madison's bouquet of peonies slipped from her fingers and landed on the wooden planks with a soft, defeated rustle. "I'm afraid," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the dock, "that I cannot contribute $50,000 to the Ashworth Family Trust. Because the Ashworth Family Trust does not exist." Trevor's face went gray. "What I can do, however," I continued, "is inform you that at approximately 8:15 this evening, which, by my watch, is in." I glanced at the delicate silver Timex I had worn for 28 years. 26 minutes. A process server from the law firm of Beaudoin and Associates will be arriving at the reception hall to personally serve Mr. Trevor Ashworth with a statement of claim filed in the Superior Court of Justice of Ontario. The claim is for the recovery of $97,000 fraudulently induced from me under false pretenses by my daughter and her fiancé, along with punitive damages, legal costs, and prejudgment interest. The dock had gone completely silent. Even the lake seemed to have stopped moving. "I should mention," I added gently, "that a second plaintiff has joined the claim. Mrs. Linda Tremblay of Oakville, whose late husband's estate contributed $63,000 to a remarkably similar family trust 2 years ago, administered by the same numbered Ontario corporation. Her claim, combined with mine, along with the criminal referral that my lawyer has already made to the Ontario Securities Commission regarding the unregistered solicitation of investment funds, should make for a rather interesting conversation with your father, Trevor. The one who owns 41% of a publicly traded company on the TSX. The one whose legal team, I understand, is quite protective of the family name." Trevor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I turned to my daughter. "Madison," I said, and I felt my voice soften against my will, because she was still my child, and I am still a mother, and that will never change no matter what she has done to me. "I need you to understand something. I am not angry. I am not here to punish you. But I am going to stop pretending that what you have been doing to me is love." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a fraction of a second I saw the 6-year-old girl with the stuffed beaver, whispering, "Are we going on an adventure, Mama?" "You listed me on a spreadsheet," I said. "You gave me columns. You gave me a projected lifetime yield. You taught a man who despises me how to extract money from me by reminding me of your father, of your tuition, of the life I built for you from nothing. You told me to my face, in front of these strangers, that I should consider a long-term care facility so I would stop inconveniencing your new family." A single tear slid down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. "I have given you everything I have, Madison. Every dollar. Every year. Every hour of sleep I did not get. I gave it freely. I gave it because I love you. But I cannot give you what you are asking for now, because what you are asking for is for me to pretend that I do not matter. And I am 53 years old, and I matter." I picked up the champagne flute again. Enjoy your reception. The process server has your table number. I walked off the dock. I did not run. I did not cry. I walked, in my navy dress and my sensible flats, past the 47 guests, past the string quartet that had frozen mid-sonata, past the open bar, past the valet stand, to the pre-arranged taxi that Hélène had booked for me that morning. The driver, a kind Somali-Canadian man named Abdi who told me later that he had 3 daughters of his own, asked no questions. He just drove me the 2 hours back to Orillia while I watched the stars come out over Highway 11. The case settled out of court 9 months later, for $412,000. Trevor's father, as Hélène had predicted, did not want the family name anywhere near a fraud allegation on the business page of the Globe and Mail. The numbered corporation was dissolved. Trevor was forced to transfer the King West condo into joint names with Madison, which then became a marital asset and, 18 months later when Madison filed for divorce, it was sold with the proceeds split down the middle. I used my portion of the settlement, minus Helene's fees, to do 3 things. First, I paid off the second mortgage on the Orillia townhouse. Second, I made a donation of $75,000 anonymous, but earmarked to the women's shelter in Orillia that had taken me and my 6-year-old daughter in on a February morning 23 years earlier. And third, I opened a small bookshop on Muskoka Street, 2 blocks from the United Church that had dropped off the Christmas box when Madison was 9. I called it Hollowed Pages, after the copy of The Handmaid's Tale that had held my $482. I sell mostly Canadian authors. I host a reading circle for women over 50 every Wednesday night. I have 2 part-time employees and 1 very fat orange cat named Atwood. Madison came to the shop 11 months after the divorce. She stood in the doorway for a long time before she came in. She had lost weight. She was not wearing any of the jewelry Trevor had given her. She held a small potted fiddle-leaf fig in her hands and she was crying before she said a single word. I did not embrace her. I was not ready for that yet. But I pulled out the chair behind the counter, and I poured her a cup of tea from my thermos, and I let her sit there for an hour without speaking. Before she left, she set something on the counter. It was the stuffed beaver. Worn, faded, with one ear chewed half off by some long-ago puppy we had briefly owned. She had kept it, all these years, in a box in her closet. I don't know if I can ever make this right, Mom, she whispered. No, I said. You can't. Not fully. But you can start. She nodded. She left. She came back the next Wednesday, and she sat in the back row of the reading circle, and she did not say a word. She has come every Wednesday since. We are not what we were. We may never be. But she is trying, and I am letting her try, and sometimes that is the best a mother can do. The stuffed beaver sits on the top shelf behind the cash register now, next to a framed photograph of my mother and a small brass plaque that reads, in tiny engraved letters, "For every woman who has walked out into the snow at 4 in the morning. You are not alone." And sometimes, on quiet Tuesday afternoons when the shop is empty and the bell above the door has not rung for an hour, I pour myself a glass of champagne, the cheap kind, from the LCBO, because I have never cared for the expensive stuff, and I raise it to the window overlooking the street, and I smile. Because they forgot one thing. They forgot that the quiet ones, the tired ones, the ones who gave everything and asked for nothing, we were never weak. We were just waiting.